Hi, you are watching Procurement and Supply Chain Live, and this next session features Peter Sharoff. He is the Chief Sourcing and Procurement Officer for AXA XL Insurance and Reinsurance, the largest property and casualty commercial lines platform in the world. Known for leading teams and organizations through transitions, he has worked in insurance and banking for more than 25 years. Peter's experience includes corporate integrations, such as a $4 billion XL Catalin deal and $15 billion AXA XL deal. He also has experience incubating and turning around functions and starting up new functions. Peter holds an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania and a BA in psychology from Rice University in Houston, Texas. And today he's going to talk about procurement, all that, and a bag of chips. Should be interesting. So welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Great to have you with us, Peter. I'll hand straight over to you for your presentation.
All right, great. Thank you. Let's start here. I'll take beginning with the letter P for $800, please. And the answer is all that and a bag of chips. So in true Jeopardy fashion, that is the answer. So what is the right question that goes with it? Well, in order to understand why it's the right question, I have to give you a bit of background. So let's start with the company that I work for, AXA XL. AXA XL is part of AXA Group, which is just under about $100 billion of revenue, makes about $4 billion of profit out of insurance all around the world. AXA XL is the large commercial arm of AXA Group. We have about just under $20 billion of gross written premium. And with that in mind, one of the things we take pride in is being the #1 product innovator on the Advise and Pacesetter Index for 5 years running. I highlight that, and we'll get into that in a few moments for a few reasons, as it has implications for the sourcing procurement function within AXA XL. AXA XL has over 9,000 colleagues around the world. We serve clients that are in 200 different countries, and we ourselves are based in or operating out of 30 different countries. We also write more than 30 lines of business in both traditional and specialty insurance. To give you a sense of what this means, I like to say that AXA XL insures everything from horseshoes to satellites, right? We insure all kinds of very unique asset classes, and that then brings up, between the global footprint and that very unique arm, a whole array of third-party implications that we need to support from a sourcing and procurement standpoint. I'll get into this when we get into the strategy, which at the AXA Group level and also the AXA XL level is to move from payer to partner. Now, a bit of an explanation. As an insurer, we obviously take pride in the fact that our customers, if they have an event and they place a claim, we then pay them to recover. That's why we're here. It's what we're good at. We take pride in it. But increasingly, with the changes in technology, with changes in data, we're realizing there's more opportunity to be more proactive about preventing events. Because after all, if we can keep our clients from having an event, that's even better than helping them to recover. And we do so, as I said, through technology, and we co-create with many other companies around the world to find innovative answers to the most complex risks. This has definite implications for what sourcing and procurement can bring to a company like AXA XL and AXA Group. Now, you heard a bit about me from Scott already. I will not belabor it. I will simply say I know I don't have the traditional background for a sourcing and procurement officer. And partially that is because of the unique opportunities that are facing us. But I will say that when I accepted the role of Chief Sourcing and Procurement Officer, there was a woman in the technology team I was leading at the time who put her hand to her head and said, "What is it procurement has that makes you want to leave us?" She was very concerned that, in fact, I was running away from technology because something was wrong, as opposed to toward procurement. And this is why it's the right question, right? What is it about sourcing and procurement at this juncture in history, since it's been around since the dawn of time, that really is so exciting and appealing? And I think it's an important question to ask because then it structures how do we spend our time, right? Where do we want to evolve our team to? So there are 3 things that I really am focused on in terms of that vision. One is when you take a look at the changes in the workforce around the world, we are moving increasingly to a distributed workforce. There are plenty of studies that will show that half of workforce spend is external in one form or fashion. And of course, traditional sourcing and procurement is involved in this, whether it's contracting SOWs or bringing in contingent labor. But we need to go beyond that, right? Regulatory structures are becoming more sophisticated. We also need to be more disciplined about who we go after and how we go after them and where they come from, because it's not only that it's outside, it's they're becoming little niches, right? Where you find Java developers sometimes is in far-flung countries and it's 20 or 30 at a time. And so to really work with the organization to plan out where this is, potentially develop sources of resource that we haven't looked at before. This requires a tight partnership between sourcing and procurement and HR. This is something that we're starting to do at AXA XL, but it really requires going beyond perhaps some of the traditional things that a sourcing and procurement team might do. The second trend is the interconnected nature of how we operate. The idea of innovation and development being among the four walls of a company is really a thing of the past, right? The budgets that you need to do that, most companies can't afford them anymore. Instead, we're moving to a networked economy in which companies cooperate to deliver innovative solution. Ernst & Young did a study that more than 2/3 of companies are making it a priority to focus on innovation partnerships in the next year. So we already have this, but more and more and more, we're seeing companies do this. And when I bring you back to the payer to partner strategy that I mentioned earlier for AXA XL and AXA Group, we're definitely right in the midst of this. This is not a place that I think traditional sourcing and procurement usually plays, because these aren't providers, these are partners. But if you look at the skills and capabilities that we have in sourcing and procurement, those very skills and capabilities could really be an asset for AXA XL in terms of how we structure these, how we put them in place, and yes, how we manage the increasing risk base between cyber, geopolitical risk, and other emerging risk categories, or at least re-emerging risk categories. The more we're doing on a networked basis, the more different risks we face. That is, again, part of the core skill set of sourcing and procurement is working with different specialty functions to make sure to handle that risk by how we engage our providers and our partners. And then finally, one of the things that gets me really excited is being able to use our billions of third-party spend to promote things that AXA Group truly care. AXA Group slide about how they are focusing on climate. I'm really proud to be part of AXA Group because they are investing a substantial amount of money to help address the climate situation that we are currently in, whether that is in terms of the climate itself and water, or financial resilience to climate change. This is something which, again, we do some of as sourcing and procurement, but I know we could do much more of is to help really act as a multiplier for corporate priorities. So it's these three things that I really am excited about, in addition to the traditional work that sourcing and procurement does. And so I said to the woman who asked me that question, no, I am running to sourcing and procurement as a career move because I believe strongly in the value it can bring. So to that question, what is sourcing and procurement that you want to be a part of? The answer is all that and a bag of chips. That's my vision. So maybe we'll do this again. Let's take corporate buzzwords for 600. And the answer there is it may be 2020. All right. The question that answers is, what is vision? And I had this vision of what sourcing and procurement could be when I took on this role. So what is vision? Well, the cynical among us might say that vision is an ambitious and far-reaching set of goals that conveniently ignores the realities of today. And I will be honest, when I took on this role a few years ago, I came in with these great aspirations and immediately faced the reality, which is our sourcing and procurement team had come through several large integrations. And while we were very sophisticated in some areas like technology and anywhere that we had to focus on risk and regulatory, we were much less sophisticated in other areas. And there was work that we had to do that was foundational and fundamental, right? We had to put in place a P2P system. We had to centralize our contracts into a contract management system. Basic block and tackle work. And so it's good to pause here for a minute. When I say all that and a bag of chips, here's what I mean. And let me pause for a second. That phrase is a very US phrase. It goes back to the 1980s, or as the younger among you might call it, the old days. And what it means is that a particular thing was already great. It was all that. Plus, there was even more, a bag of chips on top. It's a silly phrase, but it's a simple model to put in here. All that refers to traditional and necessary sourcing and procurement. You can see on the left side of the screen an operating model as a top slide, and beneath that an assessment. This particular one comes from Bain and Company, which is a company we're doing some work with. I happen to like their model, but you can get equivalent models from any number of consulting firms and advisors. We've made up our own at different places. This refers to the work that has to happen to put in place strong sourcing and procurement, data analytics, category management, sourcing strategies, and so on. This is necessary. But if we just do this, I'm not convinced that, at least within AXA XL, we will really be positioned to truly partner with HR and with our leadership team on the distributed workforce, on the network companies. When I look at it, there's more we need to do, and that to get to that bag of chips. And in this model, the bag of chips are those 4 trends that I talked about. And by the way, apologies to my art department. I did that graphic on the back of chips myself. They really shouldn't have to take any blame for that. So when I look at it, the model that I now think of is all that on one side, and the bag of chips on the other. At this stage, I just want to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about getting to the bag of chips. There are lots of speakers at this event who will talk about all that, right? How do you put in place traditional sourcing and procurement activities that are effective? And we need to do it. We continue to do it within AXA XL. But I think sometimes we focus too much internally and we lose track of the additional things we will need to do to take on the more strategic challenges. And you see that in the bag of chips, I refer to the raw materials of commercial insurance. In physical goods, the impact of sourcing and procurement is so evident to the end customer, right? If you don't get the right quality raw materials, if you don't get them through the supply chain at the right time to the right place, you can see that in the end result. In commercial insurance, it really isn't as obvious. Our raw materials are people, technology and analytics, money. But when you start thinking about the changes that I mentioned earlier, there's an opportunity for sourcing and procurement to start to get into those raw materials and help strategically, in my case, AXA XL, position itself with the right distributed workforce, structure the right networked companies, and so on. So that's what I'll be talking about for the next few minutes, is that the skills that I think we need to invest in on top of all that to achieve the bag of chips. There are 3 things we're focused on. First, when great is the enemy of good. And I want to give apologies to Jim Collins, who obviously has the famous book, When Good is the Enemy of Great, or Good to Great is the name of the book. That's the saying. What got you here won't get you there, which is a Marshall Goldsmith phrase. And then finally, making sure everyone gets to dance. And here I will cite Kevin Bacon from Footloose. All right, when great is the enemy of good. What you see on the screen here is something from the true old days. This is when humankind was moving from our ancestors who could not walk on 2 feet to where we are today. And it may seem like an odd thing for this presentation, but it highlights something that I think is very important. And that is, in order to become who we are today, we had to become bipedal. By walking on 2 feet, it freed up our hands. And by freeing up our hands, a bunch of studies have shown that also enabled us to develop our brains. The size and the complexity got huge. And as a result, we've been able to use our brains to transform the world around us for good or for ill, depending on your perspective. But I can tell you that it didn't matter whether we walked really well or kind of well. Some people pronate, some people don't. Nobody's collecting KPIs unless you're involved in sports on the length of your stride and whether you could be a better walker, right? It was a necessary condition that people walked, but that was good enough was good enough. And I think we face the same thing in sourcing and procurement and a lot of functions. We lose track of when good enough is indeed good enough. And so within AXA XL, sourcing and procurement, we're focused on getting out minimally viable products and then shifting into continuous improvement mindset. So for example, we're currently rolling out more detailed cycle time reporting, right? You should have an idea as to how long it takes you to source something, whether it's off a preferred panel or it's not, highly complex or requiring InfoSec reviews or so on, right? We're going to roll that out, but I am never going to have a cycle time discipline that is like a manufacturing company. We just don't need it. It's not necessary. And spending more time on that would take away from something else. And so we focus on minimally viable products, and then we look at how our end customer in the organization, the people that we serve, are getting value. If further improvements to our capability drive value, we do them. And if they don't, we don't anymore. It becomes very easy to look internally and become great at something that doesn't need to be great. A note I will say, we are an insurance company, and so regulatory and risk concerns are paramount, and we do tend to take those yet more seriously and make sure that we're quite robust there. The second thing I want to focus on is this phrase, what got you here won't get you there. There's two aspects I will quickly focus on. One is listening. I know it seems like something everyone does every day, but the reality is, as Stephen Covey says, most people don't listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply. And when we think about sourcing and procurement, most of our people came up as negotiators, and great negotiators do listen to understand. But really, really good ones, they listen with the intent to reply and to negotiate. But when you think about sitting with HR and with other members of the organization to get after those more strategic concerns, in many cases, they may not know what the concerns are yet. This is where the Peter Drucker quote, the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. I know that we need to be better at listening so that we are understanding what has to happen so we can help support the organization. So we made this a cultural priority. We're hiring for traits and not always just skills. And we focus in this space. The second area where the skills that got us to good procurement may not get us to the bag of chips is in the change space. I do not have enough time to do this great justice, so I put the book up on the right that I'm referring to. All of us know that in sourcing and procurement, you can get only so far on the supply side, renegotiating contracts, building panels, and so on. Ultimately, you have to make sure that the demand management side of it also falls in line, and that often means changing the behaviors of people in the organization. We talk about change management, a very well trod upon discipline to lead through that kind of change. Where I think we struggle, this isn't just sourcing and procurement, is trying to get change to happen that first time. This is where the catalyst concept comes in. So the idea comes from chemistry, and I'm paraphrasing Jonah Berger, who is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton. In chemistry, if you want to get molecules to come together in a chemical reaction, you can use brute force, which is putting up lots and lots and lots of energy. But you can also put in place what's called a catalyst, and the catalyst is a third molecule that effectively lowers the barriers to a chemical reaction happening. That's analogous to when we show up at someone's door and we want to convince them to make a change. Frequently, we show up with charts and graphs and data and why they should change. This is the equivalent of the energy. We're trying to push them to make a change. And a lot of times, the nature of trying to push someone actually makes them more resistant to the change because they know we're trying to convince them. The idea is instead to focus on lowering the barriers to change, creating a pull effect, making it so it's easier for people to change. There are a lot of examples I could go into, but time really doesn't allow. So I'm going to leave it there, but there are a few things that we're doing to try to drive that. One is we've taken a more mindful approach to signing people up for change. It isn't enough that we've gone out there and presented to them. We need to make sure that we've had the conversation. This, by the way, is where listening comes in. You need to make sure that you're truly listening to what their concerns might be so that you can lower those barriers. That allows us to focus on what the barrier for a given person is and make sure to lower it. That then creates the opportunity to then manage change. Those disciplines still matter. And then the third area that we're focused on is making sure everyone gets to dance. And my joke about Kevin Bacon aside, what I'm really talking about here is the Verna Myers comment, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Procurement is a function of specialists. Not only do we specialize in procurement activities, contracts and negotiating and so on, but we then specialize from a domain standpoint. Working at IT infrastructure sourcing is entirely different than working at claims legal firm sourcing, which is different than benefit sourcing, right? And yet, we know that we need, in addition to those specialties, some more general perspectives if we're going to engage with the firm at a strategic level. And so what we're focused on doing is, one, bringing in different skill sets and perspectives. And so, no, I'm not going to hire someone for IT infrastructure sourcing that doesn't have background. But I can certainly hire a procurement operations lead who may not know procurement, but be a great operations person. I can hire someone into data and analytics who may not know procurement, but be great at data visualization and storytelling with data. And so each of these things are areas that we're looking to do. And then once we bring it in, this is where the Vernon Myers quote matters. As someone who's come into groups with an atraditional background, it's clear when they don't want to hear what you have to say. We're making our team a place between strategy circles and other cross-functional creative solutioning where people feel that we want to hear what they have to say. So let's pull it back together, right? Ultimately, the reason I joined sourcing and procurement is looking at the trends in the marketplace. We really have a chance now in commercial insurance to drive additional value to the normal sourcing and procurement activities. We can really help as the distributed workforce becomes more and more important, as we do more and more of teaming and innovating with other firms, and finally, making sure that our corporate priorities are reflected within our third parties. When I look at all of this, there are some changes we need to make, but if we can make those changes, we can be all that and also a bag of chips. Thanks very much, and ready for any questions that might be out there.
Thank you, Peter. Fantastic presentation, and it's always good to hear Footloose mentioned in our sessions. So congratulations on managing to squeeze that in. Okay, we do have some questions for you. Now, one question that's come in from the audience here, it says, are you saying that we shouldn't be investing in foundational technologies and things like artificial intelligence and machine learning?
So that's a great question. And I don't want to leave that impression, right? There are certainly places where AI, machine learning can drive efficiencies within the sourcing and procurement process that add value to our customers. But I've certainly seen in prior lives that we get ourselves really excited by new technologies and what they can bring. And we spend money and time, and ultimately, they don't really change a lot for us. And so they serve the purpose not only of having wasted some time and effort, but also potentially have undermined our credibility with the very stakeholders that we need to convince that we really are thinking strategically and we understand how they define value. So no, we should certainly continue to invest in our foundations, and if new technologies get us there, we should absolutely be using them. But at least within AXA XL, we tend to take a little bit of a critical and cynical view to make sure that we can see that tie-in to the internal customer value.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. I hope that's cleared up whoever asked that question. And another question here, Peter, can you give some examples of what a catalyst is in the real professional world?
Yeah, let me give two, one kind of direct and one strategic. But I will tell you, if you read the book, there's some wonderful examples in that book. But a very specific one. As I mentioned, we put in place a P2P system. And so we've moved everyone from just paying invoices to putting in place the purchase request and having that flow through. But retro POs, where you're putting in place your purchase order after you get the invoice, still remain a little higher than we want. And we have communicated and we have pushed and we have put metrics in place and everything else. But ultimately, we're seeing diminishing returns. When we get out and we talk to people and really listen, we found, for example, in one of our technology teams that it had to do with a project management office process that in order to obey the PMO process, they had to be doing retro POs. So we then had to go and solve the problem with an entirely different unit to lower the barriers for adoption. People were willing to adopt, they just couldn't. At a more strategic level, I've had years of conversations with our chief claims officer because there are some things we'd like them to do on the demand management side. And we really have never been able to find a meeting of the minds. Understand that claims, we win awards for our claims at AXA XL. We're very proud of our claims capability. When we finally sat down and really talked through it, and I really listened, it became clear that their concern was simply that when they went to put different things in place, they wouldn't have the technology and data to continue to safeguard their performance. And so now we're allies in finding them some additional resources so that then we can do some things for them in sourcing and procurement, right? The problem was totally different than what we thought it was. So that's a couple of examples.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I hear that a lot interviewing execs. Sometimes we think we know what the problem is, but we're actually way off the mark. Now, coming back to the networked innovation concept, what is AXA XL doing in that space?
Well, so we're doing a lot of different things, but maybe if I just give you one example, it will help. So we write construction insurance. And for those who don't know, think about if you were someone who is going to build a multi-hundred unit property, right? Lots of apartments in a big building. You would need to buy the land, you would need to get the land ready, you would need to build, and so on and so on. Well, it's a big project, and so we insure that entire life cycle. But the risks you face over that entire life cycle really change. Now, we could just be there, and if something happens, we can pay. But instead, we've gone out, and the team has found just a couple of examples, right? You could find a vendor that specializes in drone technologies to survey the land and identify where was best to build. You could then, once they're building, have technologies which are there to make sure that people aren't entering the wrong areas. You could have technologies that will indicate if an accident is about to occur. And so those kinds of sensors aren't things that we're going to build. We're an insurance company. But we can bring together those kinds of companies into an innovative package and then provide them to our customers to say, listen, you're about to build, we'll insure you, but maybe you want to use some of these other companies to prevent losses in the first place. That's a good example of the kind of ecosystem that we're trying to build up.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. Okay, look, that's all we've got time for in terms of questions.
Right.
But just to remind everybody, if anyone wants to reach out directly to Peter, you can engage with him, obviously via usual sources, LinkedIn and email. But you can also use the event app as well, Brella. So if you are logged in there, you'll be able to network with Peter, and you can ask him some more questions directly. And I'm sure Peter will come back to you with some strong answers as well. Really great session, though. Thanks so much, Peter, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Scott. You as well.
Okay, as I said, stay with us. We'll be right back for the next session in just a couple of minutes.